I was 79 the night everything finally snapped into place. One of those cold Indiana evenings where the wind whistles through the old siding like it's trying to warn you. You'd think at my age I'd be asleep by 9, but that night I sat in my recliner with the TV on mute, staring at a folder thick enough to choke a filing cabinet. 6 months of lies. 6 months of my grandson, Tyler, bleeding me dry while I smiled at him across the dinner table like some clueless old man. But I wasn't clueless, not anymore. You're probably thinking an old-timer like me wouldn't have the stomach for revenge, real revenge, the kind that keeps you up for days and turns your hands cold even when the house is warm. But when you've spent your whole life working union shifts at the aluminum plant, raising 2 boys, burying 1 wife, and paying off 1 damn mortgage after another, you learn something. When people take what's yours, they don't stop unless you stop them. And Tyler, well, he didn't just take money. He took dignity, he took trust. He took the last piece of my wife's security, the IRA she made me promise to protect when she passed in 2017. I still hear her voice some nights telling me, "Don't let anyone push you around, Hank, not even family, especially not family." Funny how you can forget a promise until the person you made it to is gone. The first moment that night hit like a hammer. I was sitting there with the folder spread open, the forged checks, the bogus medical equipment invoices he'd set up in my name, the transfer receipts from my account to some online crypto exchange that I didn't know how to pronounce, let alone authorize. 6 months worth of betrayal, documented in black and white under the yellow kitchen light. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the pages, and I told myself it was just age, but no, it was anger. Pure, sharp, sober anger, the kind I hadn't felt since the early 80s when the plant tried to cut our pensions. The kind that tightens your jaw and makes your vision narrower, like the world shrinks down to a single point. That night around 9:47 p.m., funny how I remember the time exactly, I heard Tyler's text come through on my phone. He'd gotten comfortable, I guess, confident, maybe even bold. It lit up my screen with that casual disrespect only the young seem to pull off. "Grandpa, I need your bank login again. The Medicare form didn't go through. Call me." Medicare. He always used words he assumed I didn't fully understand. Said them slow, too, like he was explaining something to a dementia patient. I typed 1 sentence back, 1 sentence that changed the whole damn trajectory of our relationship. "Come by tomorrow morning, we'll handle it together." He replied back right away. "Awesome, love you, Grandpa." Love. That word hit harder than the lies, if you can believe it, because he used to mean it when he said it. Back when he was 8 and used to help me rake leaves into piles bigger than he was. Back when I taught him how to throw a baseball across the backyard without letting his elbow dip. Back when he looked at me like I had the answers to everything. I don't know when that changed. I don't know what turned him from that kid into the man who stood in my kitchen 6 months ago, smiling wide, telling me, "Don't worry, Grandpa, I can handle all the online stuff for you." I was naive enough to be grateful. But the truth was sitting in that folder in my lap. 38,622.73 missing. Gone unless I could prove otherwise. You want to know the worst part? I didn't even need all that money to live. I had my Social Security, my pension. It wasn't about the dollars. It was about someone I'd loved since the day he was born deciding that I was easy to take from. That kind of realization takes something out of a man, but it also gives something back, clarity. I closed the folder and set it gently on the coffee table. The plan was already forming in my mind, slow, deliberate, quieter than the furnace rumbling in the hallway. A plan that required patience, and acting, and a kind of cold resolve I didn't know I had left in me. I stood up, my knees popping like bubble wrap, and whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, Tyler. Tomorrow you walk into this house thinking I'm still the old fool." And then I said something else. Something I hadn't spoken out loud since my wife's funeral. "I'm sorry, Linda. I'm sorry it took me so long. Because I knew what had to happen next. And I knew he'd never see it coming. The night felt heavy, like the air just before a storm rolls in. And revenge, real revenge, had finally found its hour. Before all this, before the forged signatures, the disappearing transfers, the smooth lies Tyler fed me like I was some dim-witted old bird, my life was steady, predictable. I guess that's what made the betrayal hit so damn hard. I wasn't some reckless spendthrift or lonely old hermit begging for attention. I had a routine, a rhythm, a kind of quiet dignity to the days. Most mornings in Anderson, Indiana feel the same, especially on my side of town near Scatterfield Road. I'd pull myself out of bed around 6:15, knees creaking like the floorboards, and make a pot of Maxwell House. Not the fancy stuff, never saw sense in paying more for coffee than gasoline. Then I'd sit at the small oak table by the window, the one my wife insisted we buy back in '92, and look out at the maple tree she planted on our 25th anniversary. It's taller than the house now. I like to think she'd be proud of that. Some mornings I'd talk to her out loud, just little things. Cold today, or the furnace guy's coming Tuesday, or look at that squirrel making a fool of himself again. When you've been married 51 years, the silence afterwards still feels like there's someone listening. Maybe that's foolish, but it kept me steady. Tyler used to sit at that same table when he was a kid. When his dad, my son Michael, was working late shifts, Tyler would sleep over. He used to climb into that chair with his legs swinging and ask me questions faster than I could answer. "Grandpa, how hot is the sun?" "Grandpa, why do dogs dream?" "Grandpa, can you teach me how to shave even if I don't have a beard yet?" Back then the kid had a spark, a good heart. Hell, I'd have bet money on him turning into a teacher or a paramedic, something decent. But life has a way of nudging people sideways. Sometimes they fight their way back. Sometimes they don't. After my wife passed in 2017 from congestive heart failure at St. Vincent's, I drifted for a while. The house was too quiet, the bed too big, the food too tasteless. You don't realize how much a person seasons life just by being there until they're not. People told me to shrink my life, sell the house, move to a condo, let others handle things. But that wasn't me. I'd spent 42 years putting in time at the aluminum plant, earned myself a pension, built this place with my own hands, at least the parts I knew how to manage. I stayed and I managed. At first, Tyler really did come around to help. He'd show up with a sack of Taco Bell or a box of donuts and sit across from me, scrolling his phone, talking about his job at the car dealership in Noblesville. I didn't understand half of what he said, something about lead funnels and client capture. But I nodded. You do that with grandkids. You listen more than you talk. Then one day, about a year after his grandmother passed, he said, "Grandpa, you need someone to help manage your online stuff. Scams are everywhere, you know." He said it with this concerned look he must have practiced in a mirror. I remember feeling touched, honestly touched, that he cared enough to worry. "I'm not helpless, you know," I told him, sipping my coffee. "I know," he said quickly. "You're sharp as ever, but it doesn't hurt to have someone double-check things." I should have known then. I should have heard the shift in his tone, the slight lean forward in his chair, the way his eyes drifted toward the drawer that held my checkbook and IRA statements. But when you love someone, you mistake manipulation for kindness. Happens more often than people admit. The first time I handed him a piece of mail to look over, he smiled like I'd given him a gift. The second time, he asked for my email login so he could filter out the spam. The third time, he suggested linking my account so he could watch for fraud alerts. Piece by piece, I let him in. Inch by inch, he took ground. That's how betrayal works, quiet, patient, polite. The funny thing is, I still thought of myself as independent. I still mowed the lawn slowly, drove to the hardware store on Thursdays, paid my bills with a pen instead of clicking screens. I still volunteered at the Veterans Hall twice a month, sweeping floors and setting up chairs for meetings. Folks there treated me like I still mattered, like I wasn't fading into the wallpaper. I remember one afternoon after a meeting, my buddy Walt slapped me on the back and said, "Hank, you're the only guy I know who still uses a flip phone." I laughed. Maybe I should have held on to it. Because the truth was, the world was changing faster than I could track. Passwords, portals, apps, alerts, it all felt like a maze built to embarrass old men. And Tyler, he spoke that language fluently. So when he said, "Grandpa, just let me handle it," I didn't see danger. I saw relief. But little cracks started to show. The first one came one Sunday at Major when my debit card declined for a $22 grocery run. The cashier whispered, "It happens," but her eyes said something else. Embarrassment gnawed at me all the way home. Tyler explained it away. "Bank glitch, Grandpa, happens all the time." But the way he avoided eye contact should have tipped me off. There were other signs. Envelopes missing before I got to the mailbox, Tyler showing up unannounced, the way he'd hover when I opened bills. But I brushed it off. That's the thing about trust. You defend the people who break it long after you shouldn't. Back then, I still loved Tyler without suspicion. I still believed family meant something. I still thought I was safe in my own home. But the truth was already growing roots inside my life, quietly spreading beneath the surface, waiting for the day I'd finally see it. And when I did, well, that's when everything started to fall apart. Looking back, the first real crack didn't come from a missing dollar or a forged document. It came from a moment so small, so everyday, that I almost let it slip right past me. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't kick in your door. It slides under it like a draft you convince yourself isn't cold. It was early March, the kind of Indiana day where the sky hangs low and gray, and the wind off the field stings your ears whether you're ready for it or not. I'd driven to the community hospital North Cardiology wing for a checkup. Nothing serious, just the usual keep an eye on this, talk the doctors hand out like Halloween candy once you hit 75. When I went to pay the copay, the woman behind the counter, young, with bright red nails and a smile too polite to trust, looked at her screen and frowned. "Mr. Whitaker, it says here your payment method is locked." "Locked?" I shifted my weight, feeling a pinch in my hip. "What's that mean?" She lowered her voice as if I'd done something wrong. "It means your bank declined verification. You might want to call them." Now I'm not a man who embarrasses easily, but standing there with people in line behind me shifting and sighing, something hot crawled up my neck. I paid in cash. Thank God I still carried a few bills, and walked out into the cold, clutching my receipt like it might bite. I called the bank from my truck, the heater blowing lukewarm air. After 10 minutes of menus and holds, a man said, "Yes, sir, your account was locked due to suspicious activity." "What activity?" "I'm showing multiple online transfers within the same hour. Unusual pattern for your account." My stomach tightened. "Transfers to who?" "To a Coinbase-linked service, sir." What?" "Cryptocurrency." I almost laughed. Me, involved in cryptocurrency. That'd be like telling a cow it was suddenly the CEO of Walmart. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I don't even know what that is." "Sir," he replied, "who else has access to your accounts?" And that's when the hair stood up on the back of my neck. Because the answer was only one name. Tyler. But I didn't say it, not yet. Some part of me still wanted to protect him, to explain it away. Maybe I'd clicked something wrong. Maybe it was fraud, not his fraud, just fraud. The world is full of thieves, right? Why assume the thief was family? "Let me look into it," I said. "Of course, sir. We'll freeze the account temporarily." I hung up, sat there staring through the windshield at nothing. The parking lot, half slushed from melting snow, shimmered like a warning I didn't want to read. When I got home, Tyler was already sitting on my porch steps. Hoodie up, hands in his pockets, rocking on his heels the way he used to when he was little and got caught lying about finishing his homework. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, standing too fast. "You weren't answering your phone." "I was driving," I said. "What's going on?" He gave a practiced little laugh. "Funny thing, I got an alert on your email. Something about the bank freezing an account. Probably a scam. You know how they try to scare older folks." Older folks. He said it too easily, like he wasn't talking to me but at me. I felt something twist in my chest. Not pain, recognition. "You been in my email again?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He shrugged. "Just making sure everything's safe. You told me to keep an eye on things." I hadn't said exactly that, but lies, well, they like to wear familiar coats. I watched him closely then, not the smile he was trying to force, not the helpful tone he'd polished like a salesman's pitch. No, I watched his eyes. I'd learned in the plant long ago that eyes tell the truth even when mouths don't. His eyes were wrong. Nervous. Avoiding mine. Jumping toward the mailbox. Toward the front door. Toward the inside of my life. "Tyler," I said slowly, "what were those transfers about?" "Transfers?" His voice popped up an octave. "What transfers?" "The ones to the crypto place." He froze just for half a heartbeat, but I caught it. A single tiny pause, enough to split open everything. Then he chuckled. "Oh, that was me setting up a fraud monitor. They require test transfers to verify identity." "That true?" I asked. "Of course, look it up." He said it with that confident swagger 20-somethings wear like cologne. The kind that says, "You won't challenge me." The kind that hopes, banking on it, that I won't. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I just nodded slowly. "All right," I said, "if you say so." His shoulders eased, but mine didn't. He walked inside like he owned the place, straight to the kitchen where he opened the fridge without asking. He grabbed a soda, popped the tab, leaned against the counter. "You know I'm just trying to help, right?" he said. "I know," I replied. But inside something shifted. The trust I'd held onto for years cracked, not broken, not yet, but cracked like a windshield after the first pebble hits it. You can drive a few miles like that, sure, maybe a few hundred, but eventually the fracture spreads. It always spreads. 2 days later, the next crack arrived. A letter from Medicare addressed to Tyler Whitaker, authorized representative. Only I had never signed anything authorizing that. When I showed it to him, he didn't blink. "Oh yeah, Grandpa, they must have processed that form I submitted. It's easier if I'm your contact." "Why do I need a contact?" I asked. "You know," he said gently, "with your memory getting fuzzy sometimes." My hands tightened around the letter. "My memory's fine." He tilted his head, voice softening in that practiced way. "Grandpa, you forgot we talked about this." We hadn't. Not even close. And in that moment, the soft lie, the patronizing tone, the subtle rewriting of reality, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Doubt. Not of Tyler. Of myself. That's the cruelty of manipulation. It makes you question your own footing. But that doubt didn't last long, because the shattering moment, the one no man forgets, was waiting just around the corner. And when it hit, the crack widened into a break that would never heal the same. You ever have a moment so sharp, so clean in its brutality, that the rest of your life divides itself into before and after? Mine arrived on April 17th, 2023, at exactly 2:14 in the afternoon. Funny how your mind bookmarks the second your world changes. It was a Monday. I remember because Mondays were the days I drove to Payless on Nickel Avenue for the senior discount on produce. I'd bought a bag of apples, a loaf of bread, and a jar of peanut butter. Nothing special. Nothing that should have marked the day as different. But life likes to keep its knives hidden. When I got home, the mailbox was unusually full. Not just the ads and the utility bill, but thick envelopes, The kind banks send when they're feeling serious. 3 of them, all with my name printed clean as ice. I set my groceries on the counter and opened the first one. Then the second. Then the third. Each letter said the same thing in its own stiff, official words. Your withdrawal of $7,500 has been processed. Your withdrawal of $9,000 has been processed. Your withdrawal of $6,800 has been processed. Total $23,300. Gone. From my IRA. From the account Tyler promised he would keep an eye on. My heart thudded so hard against my ribs I thought I might drop right there on the kitchen tile. I sat down, more like collapsed into the chair by the window. The apples rolled out of the bag and scattered across the floor. I didn't pick them up. Instead, I dialed the number on the notice. My hand shook so badly I hit the wrong button twice. A woman answered. This is Cheryl with Wellspring Retirement Services. How may I assist you today? Withdrawals, I croaked. There's been a mistake, several. I didn't authorize any withdrawals. She asked for my account number, my security questions, the last 4 of my social security. I answered every one. My heart was hammering so loud I barely heard myself speak. Then she said, matter-of-factly, Mr. Whitaker, each withdrawal was completed using verified login credentials from your home IP address. My what? I asked. The signal came from inside your home, and the transactions were approved with two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication. The phrase might as well have been ancient Egyptian. Ma'am, I whispered, I didn't approve anything. She paused. I could hear typing. Then, sir, the digital authorization includes a mobile number ending in 4382. Is that yours? No. No, it was. But it was Tyler S. I knew it like I knew my own street name. I'd written that number in a birthday card 2 months earlier. Sir, she asked. I swallowed hard. There's been fraud, I said. I think someone close to me has been using my accounts. The word close tasted bitter. Family. Blood. Someone I'd raised on pancakes and Sunday baseball. She took a breath. We can freeze the account immediately and open an investigation. Do it. I hung up the phone, but my hand stayed hovering in the air. I stared at it, at the tremor in my fingers that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. I felt hollowed out, scooped clean like someone had taken a spoon to my chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. No refrigerator hum, no furnace running. Just the ringing in my ears and the slow, sinking realization that the person I trusted most had carved through my life like a thief with a key. Then, because fate likes timing, my phone buzzed in my hand. Tyler. A text. Hey, Grandpa, heading over later to help you with bills. Need to fix that Medicare login. Fix. God, the boldness. The casual confidence of someone who believes the old man is blind, deaf, and halfway to senile. I stared at that message until the letters blurred. Something inside me strained, something thin and fragile that had been holding on out of habit, out of love, out of stupid, stubborn hope. And right then it snapped. But the shattering moment wasn't the paperwork, wasn't even the text. It was what happened next. I stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept my old checkbooks, and pulled out the blue one, the one with my wife's handwriting inside. Her looping cursive on the ledger lines, notes she wrote to herself like "Don't forget church potluck" or "Ask Hank to fix the dryer." But that was what broke me. What broke me was the last page. A carbon copy of a check. Dated February 11th, 2023. Made out for $4,000. Signed not by me, but by someone trying very, very hard to copy my wife's handwriting. My knees went weak. I sat down before I fell. My finger traced the signature line. It shook, but the rage underneath it didn't. My wife had been gone 6 years. And he forged her name. My throat tightened, hot and sharp. "Oh, Linda," I whispered. "He used you, he used you." That's when the grief turned into something else. Not anger. Not fear. Resolve. A cold, sharpening resolve that settled into my bones and straightened my spine. I wasn't confused. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't the old fool he'd hoped I'd be. I saw everything with clarity now. Tyler didn't just steal money. He stole the memory of my wife. He stole the trust of our family. He stole the dignity of my age and tried to wrap it around my neck like a leash. No more. I folded the forged check, slipped it into my pocket, and spoke out loud to the empty house. "This ends now." And as if summoned by the words, I saw his car pull into my driveway through the window. Tyler stepping out, smiling, walking toward my door with the confidence of a man who believes the world still belongs to him. He had no idea what was waiting for him inside. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the beginning of a descent neither of us would walk away from unchanged. There's a strange thing that happens when the truth finally sinks its teeth into you. It doesn't roar or scream or tear, it settles, like a heavy coat draped over your shoulders, one you didn't ask for, one you can't take off. That's what the days after discovering Tyler's fraud felt like. Heavy, gray, quiet in a way that wasn't peace. It wasn't the dramatic kind of descent you see in movies. No bottles on the table, no screaming at the sky, no melodrama. Mine was quieter, slower, like a man slipping underwater without making a splash. And it began the moment he stepped through my front door that afternoon. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, cheerful as a morning radio host. A bag of Wendy's dangled from his hand. "Brought you a chicken sandwich. Figured you'd forget lunch again." Forget. He said that word like a needle, sharp enough to push under the skin without bleeding. I watched him set the food on the table. He didn't notice the scattered apples on the floor. He didn't notice the bank letters beside my coffee cup. He didn't notice me staring at him with a kind of hollow quiet. "Everything okay?" he asked, finally looking at me. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I nodded. He sat across from me, unwrapping his sandwich. The smell of fried chicken drifted through the kitchen. Normally, I'd have told him to get a plate, not eat straight from the wrapper like an animal. But not that day. That day, he could have set the table on fire and I wouldn't have flinched. "Grandpa," he said between bites, "about your accounts, I think the bank is mixing things up. Happens all the time with older clients. I cut him off. "Tyler." He froze mid-chew. "I got letters today. Withdrawals, big ones." He blinked, then swallowed hard. "What, I mean, did you ask the bank? It's probably." "Don't," I said quietly. "Please, not right now." He opened his mouth, closed it again. I saw something flicker behind his eyes, not guilt. No, something meaner, something calculating, the look of a man adjusting his strategy. "We'll get it fixed," he said. "You don't have to worry, okay?" But worry had nothing to do with it anymore. After he left too quickly, with a muttered excuse about picking up a shift, I sat at the kitchen table until long after the sun went down. I didn't eat, didn't turn on the lights, just sat there with the forged check in my pocket and the realization that something inside me had split open. That's when the descent truly began. The next few weeks blurred together, April into May, rain feeling colder than it should, my house feeling emptier, my mind stretched between anger and disbelief like elastic thinning toward a break. Small things started slipping. Not memory, not the way Tyler tried to make me believe. No, the little slips were physical. I'd go to make coffee and find my hands shaking when I poured the grounds. I'd open the mailbox and feel a jolt of dread every time I heard paper shuffle. I'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling fan, listening for footsteps that weren't there. The worst was the loneliness, not the regular kind that comes with age. This was the kind that says, someone you love turned you into prey, and nobody knows but you. I stopped going to the Veterans Hall. Walt called twice, left voicemails asking if I was under the weather or just tired of old fools like him. I didn't call back. Couldn't. I didn't know how to talk about something that hadn't fully formed into words inside my own head. One Thursday, I drove to Major and walked the aisles without buying anything. Just wandered. My legs felt unsteady. The fluorescent lights too bright. A kid stocking shelves asked if I was okay. Just thinking, I said. About what? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What would I tell him? That the grandson I raised was bleeding me dry like a deer in the woods. That I wasn't afraid of losing money, but losing myself. Instead, I said, looking for peanut butter, and walked away. I didn't buy peanut butter that day. May 9th, I got a letter from Medicare. Not a bill. A notice. Your authorized representative has updated your health coverage preferences. Authorized representative. Tyler. He changed my coverage plan, downgraded it, so he could pocket the difference from a fraudulent reimbursement claim. That's when the tremor in my hand stopped being nerves and started being rage. But here's the truth. I still wasn't ready to act. I wasn't ready to fight. I was slipping, sinking into myself like a man trapped under ice. I started sleeping in my recliner. Couldn't bear the bedroom, too many memories of my wife. Couldn't bear the silence. The house felt like a witness. Every creak in the floorboards reminded me of what I'd allowed. One evening, I found myself talking aloud to the empty living room. How did I let him do this, Linda? I whispered. How did I get so old? The answer was silence. That silence pressed on my chest until it hurt. Then came the night, May 19th, when Tyler crossed a line he didn't even know existed. He showed up unannounced, let himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago. I was half asleep in the recliner when I heard the door. I didn't move, pretended to be out cold. He walked softly, too softly, not toward me but toward my bedroom. I listened as drawers opened, papers shuffled, something small clicked my lockbox. My wife's letters were in there. Her jewelry. My discharge papers from '69. And the last photo we took together before the cancer scare that never really left her. I heard him whisper, "Come on, where is it?" I held my breath. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he'd hear it. Then a soft exhale. Got you. He left quietly, didn't even close the door all the way. I waited 2 full minutes before I stood. My knees shook. When I stepped into the bedroom, the sight punched the air out of me. My lockbox was open. The envelope with my wife's ring, the one I planned to give my great-granddaughter someday, was gone. That was it. Money was one thing. Lies another. But her ring, the last piece of her I had. He didn't steal an object. He stole memory. He stole meaning. And something in me hardened. The descent wasn't a slide anymore. It was a landing. A cold, solid landing at the bottom, where a man finally knows he has nothing left to lose. The next morning, I made a pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and uttered the first real words of clarity I'd spoken in months. He's not going to stop, not unless I stop him. That's where revenge was born, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Out of survival. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who'd listen. Someone who'd believe me. Someone who wouldn't look at my shaking hands and think old, but think wronged. I didn't know who it would be yet. But they were coming. If part 5 was the bottom of the well, then what happened next was the slow, deliberate climb back up, hand over hand, breath by breath. But I didn't climb alone. Turns out, Even when you think the world's done with you, someone unexpected steps out of the cracks and says, "No, not yet." For me, that person was a nurse named Rosa Delgado. I met her 2 days after Tyler slipped my wife's ring out of my lockbox. I'd gone to the VA clinic on Scatterfield Road for a routine blood pressure check, mostly just to get out of the house. My chest felt tight, my thoughts crowded, and sitting alone in that living room felt like being trapped with a ghost. Rosa was maybe in her early 50s, strong hands, soft voice, eyes that looked like they'd seen enough human mess to know the difference between a man who's sick and a man who's drowning. She took my vitals, tapped the numbers into her tablet, then frowned. "You're running high today, Mr. Whitaker," she said. "Lot on my mind," I muttered. She didn't rush, didn't push. She just sat on the little rolling stool across from me and waited, hands folded over her knee. That kind of silence, the kind that means I'm here if you want me to be, it does things to a man. Finally, I said, "My grandson's been stealing from me." Her face didn't twist in surprise. No raised brows, no pity, just a slow, understanding nod. "Tell me what happened," she said. I told her everything. The transfers, the forged signatures, the Medicare changes, the night he snuck into my bedroom like a stranger, the stolen ring. When I finished, she didn't say, "Are you sure?" the way others might have. She said, "Happens more than people think, too damn much." That was the first breath of relief I'd had in months. She went on, "Elder financial abuse, it's quiet. Nobody talks about it. And the victims," she paused, then looked me square in the eyes. "The victims usually blame themselves." I looked down at my hands. Maybe I should have seen it. "No," she said firmly, "he shouldn't have done it." She gave me a brochure, thin, government-looking, the kind you normally toss, but she tapped the top of it. "Read this. There's a legal aid office in Muncie that handles cases like yours, and there's a woman there, Margaret Chen, smart as hell, doesn't back down." I tucked the pamphlet into my jacket pocket. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. She smiled, "Because someone helped my dad when he went through the same thing." That hit harder than I let on. The next day, I dialed the number on the pamphlet. A receptionist answered, took my name, and said someone would call back. I'd heard that line before, usually means nothing happens. But 15 minutes later, my phone rang. "This is Margaret, tell me everything." Her voice was sharp, confident, the kind that could slice through bureaucracy like a hot knife. I told her my story again, slower this time. She stopped me twice to ask questions, both times zeroing in on details I hadn't realized were important. "Do you have physical documents?" "Yes." "Do you still have the forged check?" "Yes." "Did anyone else witness him entering accounts?" "No." "Does he have power of attorney?" "God, no." "Good, that makes this easier." Easier? First time I'd heard that word since this mess started. She said, "I want you to come in, bring everything, and do not, under any circumstances, confront him again." I promised. It was the easiest promise I'd made in years. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder that had become my second shadow. I organized everything: bank statements, printouts, letters, the forged check, even the empty ring envelope. I wrote dates next to each incident. My hand steadied the more I wrote, like each word anchored me back to myself. When the folder was complete, I closed it gently and whispered, "All right, Linda, I'm moving." Then came a soft knock at the door. I froze. It was 8:23 p.m., and Tyler never came that late. I opened the door to find a figure I didn't expect. Walt, my buddy from the Veterans Hall. Gray beard, old bomber jacket, same grouchy squint he's had since '72. "You gonna tell me why you've been ignoring my calls?" he asked. I thought about lying, about shrugging it off, but the weight I'd been carrying wouldn't let me. "I've been dealing with something," I said. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, always did that. "Well, spill it." I told him everything. When I got to the part about the ring, his jaw set hard. "That boy needs a lesson," he muttered. "No," I said, "he needs justice." He looked at me, really looked. Then nodded slowly. "You got a plan?" "I'm getting one." "Well," he said, pulling out a chair, "then I reckon you need help." It was strange. For months I'd felt alone, like a man shouting down an empty hallway, and suddenly I had two people, Rosa and Walt, standing beside me without hesitation. Gathering, that's what Margaret later called it. I was gathering my people, my truth, my spine again. And something inside me, something old and fierce, began to wake up. The next morning I headed to Muncie for my meeting with Margaret. The sky was bright, not warm but clear. A good omen if you believe in those things. Margaret turned out to be a firecracker in a navy blazer, sharp eyes, quick pen strokes, zero nonsense. She laid everything out like a general mapping a battlefield. "This is felony theft," she said. "Multiple counts, elder exploitation, fraud, identity misuse. And because he forged your late wife's signature," she leaned back in her chair, "that's going to bury him." I didn't smile, but I felt something loosen inside my chest. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't losing pieces of myself one by one. I was preparing. Margaret slid a fresh notebook across the desk. "For the next phase," she said, "you're going to document everything. Dates, times, messages, conversations. And you're going to do exactly what I say." I nodded. "Good," she said, "because now, Mr. Whitaker, now we build the trap." A shiver ran through me. Not fear. Anticipation. The gathering was complete. And the setup. It was about to begin. There's a certain feeling you get when everything shifts into motion, like a car finally starting after a long winter. That's what the next few days felt like. Everything grinding into place, the engine of my plan turning over, a hum in the air that promised action. The first part of the setup was simple. I didn't need to be in Tyler's face yet. No, I had to let him keep thinking everything was fine. That was the trick. I needed him to think he had me right where he wanted me, alone, isolated, weak. That's how he'd been playing me after all. So now I had to flip the script. The morning after I left Margaret's office, I went home and immediately started gathering everything for the next move. A hidden camera, a voice recorder, and a second phone, one I could keep tucked away and never let Tyler know about. Margaret had given me the green light to start documenting everything. So I did. Every message, every phone call, every visit. Tyler texted me later that day. "Hey Grandpa, just checking in. You need anything?" I almost smiled. It was the kind of message he used to send when he was younger, before all the betrayal, before the money and the lies. Now it was just a cover, a mask he threw on every time he needed me to think he was still that sweet kid who used to help me with the yard work. I didn't respond right away. That was the plan. I needed him to keep coming to me, not the other way around. Let him think he was the one controlling the situation. 2 days later, I set the trap. Tyler had been over a few times in the past week, dropping by with helpful suggestions for how I could manage my finances better, suggestions that always seemed to come with him handling my account numbers and passwords. But I'd stopped him every time, making it clear that I didn't need his help anymore. This time, though, I played it differently. He called in the afternoon, his voice all smooth and friendly. "Grandpa, I've been thinking. We should sit down and go over those accounts. I'm sure everything's fine, but I just want to be sure you're not getting scammed again." It took everything in me not to snap. He knew exactly what he was doing. "All right," I said, my voice calm, "but no more online stuff for now. We'll go over it, but we'll do it the old way. It was a little test, a little nudge. If he was genuinely concerned, he'd come over and we'd talk about it like family. If he was still up to something, well, I'd know. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he said. When he arrived, I was ready. The camera in the corner of the room was angled perfectly, capturing everything. The voice recorder was tucked into my shirt pocket, set to record the conversation as soon as he started talking. I acted casual. "Grab a seat, Tyler. I've been looking through some old papers." I gestured to the pile of documents I'd laid out on the table. The fake receipts, the old transfer statements, and the fraudulent forms I knew he'd put in place. The forged check was at the top. I wanted him to see it, to feel that moment of confidence where he thought he'd won. "Thanks, Grandpa," he said, and sat down across from me. There was a shift in his demeanor, just a tiny one when he saw the documents. I could almost feel the gears turning in his head. He wasn't expecting this. "Let's get this over with," I said. "I want to go over these things one more time." He nodded, his fingers tapping nervously on the table, eyes flicking between the papers and me. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer. "I told you before I can help you out. You don't have to worry about all this stuff anymore." I didn't answer right away. I just kept looking at him, letting the silence sit between us. He shifted again, clearly uncomfortable. "You know," I said finally, leaning forward, "I've been thinking about what you said, about me not understanding how things work anymore." His eyes widened, but only a little. He was playing it cool, trying to maintain control of the conversation, but I saw the flicker of concern beneath his surface. "I thought I had a handle on things," I continued, "but I'm starting to see how much I missed." Tyler swallowed, clearly not knowing where this was going. That's the thing about manipulation. It works until the person you're using starts to figure it out. And right then, I could see the faintest tremor in his hand as he reached for the documents. "You're not stupid, Grandpa," he said quickly. "You're not like the others. I just want to help." I pushed the forged check forward until it was right in front of him. His eyes narrowed as he looked at it, but I didn't give him a chance to speak. "Tell me, Tyler, what's this?" His face froze. His fingers hovered just above the check. I don't know what you're talking about," he said, the lie hanging in the air like a bad smell. I didn't even flinch. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice low and steady. "Not this time." That's when I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes, the way his hands started to shake ever so slightly. He could still deny everything, but the pressure was mounting. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Grandpa," he muttered, his voice strained. "I just thought you wouldn't notice." Notice? Of course I noticed. Every penny, every lie, every betrayal. He was almost there, slipping. The guilt was creeping into his voice, even though he was still trying to hide it. But I could hear it, hear him break. "I trusted you, Tyler," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I trusted you." And for a moment, just a moment, he seemed to collapse inward, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his actions hit him. I watched him carefully, letting him stew in his own guilt before I said the words I'd been waiting to say. "I'm not the fool you thought I was." Tyler didn't speak. He just sat there, unable to meet my eyes, staring down at the check in front of him. I could feel the trap tightening. The setup was working. I turned off the voice recorder, and that's when I made my move. "We're going to do this my way now," I said, standing up. "The police, the bank, the courts, you're going to have to face the consequences." I walked toward the phone, already dialing Margaret. This was it, the final step. And Tyler, he didn't even try to stop me. "You can't go back once you make the call. You can't unring the bell, no matter how much you wish you could." When I dialed Margaret's number, I could feel the weight of everything shifting, right then and there. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the moment everything changed. It was no longer about finding the pieces of the puzzle. It was about putting them together and watching them fall into place. The phone rang twice before Margaret answered, her voice cool and crisp as usual. "Mr. Whitaker?" she asked. "It's done," I said simply. "I've got him, it's time." I could hear her pause on the other end, and then she spoke with quiet precision. "Are you sure? You know what this means?" I didn't hesitate, not this time. "I'm sure. He's sitting right in front of me. He's the one who's been stealing from me. I've got the proof and I'm not turning back." "Good," Margaret said, her voice hardening into the confidence that had made me trust her. "We're moving forward. I'll be at the courthouse first thing in the morning. I've already contacted the authorities. This will be official." I hung up and turned back to Tyler, who was still sitting at the kitchen table. He looked like a cornered animal, every muscle in his body tense, every little twitch in his fingers betraying him. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The evidence was on the table and he knew it. "You're making a huge mistake, Grandpa," Tyler said, his voice quivering just slightly. "You don't have to do this." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was listening to the years of trust he'd thrown away. I was listening to the quiet desperation in his voice as he realized I wasn't the easy mark he thought I was. I was listening to something far more important, my own dignity. "You made your choice," I said, my voice steady. "Now it's time for you to face the consequences." His eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but there was none. He couldn't run, not anymore. I'd caught him in the act. I had the proof. I had his lies, his manipulations, his betrayals, all of it laid out like the evidence in a court case. The doorbell rang. It was the police. They were early, but I'd expected that. Margaret had already made the arrangements, and she wasn't wasting time. Tyler's face drained of color. I could see the panic settling in as he scrambled for a response, some way to explain away what was happening. He stood up and made a half-hearted attempt to push past me, but I stood my ground. "You can't do this," he spat, desperation creeping into his voice. "Grandpa, please." But I didn't move. "I can and I will," I said. "The law doesn't care about your excuses, Tyler." The police officer who stepped through the door was a tall woman with dark brown hair and a no-nonsense look in her eyes. She didn't need introductions. She'd seen enough cases like this to know what was going on. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, extending a hand, "we're here to assist you." I shook her hand. "Thank you for coming." I glanced at Tyler, who was now pacing nervously by the kitchen island, his hands shaking. "You're making a huge mistake," Tyler repeated, his voice shaking now. "You don't understand, Grandpa. I was just helping you. It wasn't supposed to be like this." The officer stepped forward, her voice firm. "Tyler Whitaker, you're under arrest for financial fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft." He stopped. For a split second, I thought he might try to run, but instead he just looked down at the floor, his face twisting in shame. Then the officer read him his rights. It was almost surreal, watching it unfold in front of me, like something from a courtroom drama. The words sounded so much more powerful in real life. "Everything you've done to me," I said, my voice steady, "has caught up with you. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my trust. You tried to make me an old fool, and now you're going to answer for it." Tyler was cuffed, but he didn't fight. He let the officer take him out the door without a word, his head hanging low, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood there for a long moment, watching the door close behind him. It felt like an eternity, like the weight of all that had happened was finally settling on my shoulders. And for the first time in months, I felt lighter. The officer turned back to me, her expression softening. "Mr. Whitaker, we've got it from here. You did the right thing." I nodded. I didn't have the energy to speak. My mind was still racing, processing everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the cold, sharp justice that had finally come to call. I looked down at my hands, then back at the table where the documents still lay, proof of the man I once called family and the man he'd tried to become. The phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out. It was a message from Margaret. "Good work. The investigation's moving forward, but this is just the beginning. He'll be held accountable. We'll make sure of it." And I knew. This wasn't just about Tyler anymore. It was about me. It was about setting a boundary. It was about reclaiming the life I'd spent decades building, one piece at a time. The storm was over. And now I had to face the calm. They say the truth always comes out in the end. It's a nice sentiment, but when the truth hits, it doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like the whole damn world is unspooling bit by bit. Like you've been standing on a floor that's suddenly turned to quicksand, and everything you thought was solid beneath your feet starts to tilt, shifting in ways you can't control. That's what the next few days felt like, watching it all unravel piece by piece. Tyler's arrest was only the beginning. The fallout came fast, too fast, and suddenly I was in the middle of something I'd never expected. Not from him, not from the boy I'd raised. The police did their job. They kept me updated, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was still too surreal, too clean. Tyler's arrest was just a part of the bigger picture. There was the trial to think about, the paperwork, the inevitable media coverage. It was all out of my hands now. What was still in my hands, though, were the memories, the moments where I'd trusted him, let him in. The way he smiled at me with that innocent look, the one that made me think he was still the boy who used to sit on my knee. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just Tyler who had to answer for this. It was me, too. The first meeting with the lawyer was a blur. Margaret was there, and so was a prosecutor who was just as sharp as she was. They walked me through the process, what would happen next, how the legal system worked when it came to elder abuse cases like mine. I had to sign forms, go over more documents. It felt like a stack of paper was slowly becoming my life's work. And that's when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. All these years, I'd been a part of the problem. Sure, Tyler had stolen from me, but I'd let him in. I'd let him manipulate my trust. I'd allowed him to believe he could take from me without consequences. Maybe it was the loneliness, the way people start treating you differently when they think you're just another old man waiting to die. Maybe it was the way I'd let him convince me that I couldn't handle the modern world anymore. Maybe it was just my own damn pride. But I should have known better. I should have kept my guard up. I shouldn't have let myself be the victim in his game. I should have seen it coming. And that's the hardest part, seeing it now. Seeing how far things had gone, how deep the roots of his betrayal had run. Every time I thought I had it figured out, another layer peeled away. Another lie revealed. Another piece of me exposed. The hardest part, though, watching him unravel. Watching the boy I thought I knew, the boy I raised, slowly become a shadow of who I thought he was. It wasn't long before the media caught wind of Tyler's arrest. When the story broke, it hit like a freight train. The news reporters showed up at my doorstep, their cameras and microphones thrusting themselves into my face, demanding answers I didn't have. Questions like, "How could you let your grandson steal from you? What did you miss? Was it the signs of elder abuse?" I didn't answer any of them. Not because I didn't know the answers, but because I was tired. Tired of explaining my life to people who only cared for the drama. Tired of being the headline in a story that wasn't about the truth, but about the spectacle. I'd learned that much. True justice wasn't a show. It wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about standing firm when the world tried to tear you down. It was about walking through the wreckage and coming out the other side. The days dragged on. The legal battles started, and every time I sat in that courtroom, I felt like I was peeling back a layer of my past. A past I'd tried to keep safe, to protect. But Tyler's crimes, his betrayal, had left marks. The longer I watched, the more I realized I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting to reclaim my own life. Tyler's defense lawyer tried to paint him as a victim, said he was under pressure trying to help me. that he didn't know what he was doing, that he was just helping the way he thought was best. But I knew better. I saw through that lie. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't accidentally steal my money. He made a choice. Over and over again, he made that choice. And every time he took more from me, he got a little more brazen, a little more sure that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care enough to stop him. But I did. And I was going to make sure the world knew. The trial came to a close a few weeks later, and Tyler was sentenced to a few years in prison. It wasn't as much as I'd hoped, but it was something. Justice had been served, at least in part. When they finally took him away, I watched from the back of the courtroom. I didn't say a word, didn't make a scene. I just watched as he was escorted out, his face still holding that defiant look he'd worn the whole time. But underneath it, I saw the cracks. I saw the fear he'd tried so hard to hide. It didn't make me feel better, but it made me feel something. As I left the courthouse, I looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange light over everything. It wasn't a perfect sunset, but it was beautiful in its own way, just like life, just like my journey. The weight had lifted, not all of it, but enough to make room for something new, for the chance to rebuild, to trust again, not with Tyler, but with myself, to trust that I could make it through the storm and still come out standing. And that's what mattered most. It's funny how the quiet moments can feel the loudest after everything's said and done. The last few months had been a whirlwind, painful, chaotic, and full of surprises I never saw coming. But now, as I sat in my living room, the house felt still. No more police knocking. No more media outside my door. Just the soft creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint rustle of a breeze through the trees outside. I was finally alone with my thoughts. Tyler's trial had been the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. He was locked up now, serving his time, and though it didn't undo the damage, it did give me something I hadn't had in a long time: closure. The kind of closure that comes from seeing justice done, even when the cost feels too high. I sat in my recliner and looked out the window at the maple tree. It was late May now, and the branches were heavy with new leaves. They swayed gently in the wind, and I thought about how my wife had planted it all those years ago. How it had grown taller than the house, just like our love had. Strong, steady, and unyielding. The tree was still here. She was still here in a way. I could feel her presence as if she were sitting beside me, guiding me through the storm. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the sting of grief so sharply. It was a soft ache now. The kind that reminds you that what's lost is still part of you, that the past shapes who you are, but it doesn't have to define you. I went to the Veterans Hall the next week. Walt had been calling again, and I finally picked up. He was too persistent to ignore, and I was tired of avoiding the people who cared about me. It felt good to go back, to hear the laughter and the chatter, the stories of old men who'd fought wars and built lives. There was comfort in their voices. And when Walt saw me, he gave me one of those quiet nods of approval, the kind that didn't need words. "How you holding up, Hank?" he asked, clapping me on the shoulder. "Better," I said, sitting down at the table. "Been a long few months, but I'm getting there." "Good to hear," he said. "You know we're all still here. You're not alone in this." I appreciated that. Walt didn't have to say anything. He just showed up. Sometimes that's enough. The others in the hall were just as welcoming. They didn't ask too many questions, just let me be part of the group again. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. It reminded me that I hadn't lost everything. Some things, real things, couldn't be taken, like friendship, like community. I still had my house and I still had my pension. My Social Security check came every month like clockwork. It wasn't much, but it was enough. More than enough, really. I didn't need a fortune. I needed peace. I needed to be able to look myself in the mirror without seeing a fool. And now, finally, I could do that. The house was quieter than it had ever been. There were no more late-night calls from Tyler asking for money or explaining away the latest accident. No more checking my bank statements with trembling hands, wondering what he'd taken next. It was just me and the walls now, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without that constant weight pressing down on me. I spent more time outside, tending to the garden my wife had loved so much. The flowers she planted still bloomed every year, and the vegetables I grew gave me something to focus on. I wasn't a farmer, but I'd learned how to grow things over the years, just like I'd learned how to grow patience, resilience, and yes, even forgiveness. And then came the day when I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Tyler anyway. I'd forgiven him, though I didn't think he deserved it. No, the forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. For the man I used to be, the man who had trusted too easily, who had believed in family without question. I wasn't going to carry that bitterness any longer. It wasn't worth it. It was easier to let it go than I expected. I went to the cemetery to visit Linda, my wife, a few days later. The flowers I brought were fresh, bright, and colorful, just like she would have liked. I knelt by her grave and spoke to her, though I wasn't sure if she could hear me, but I said the words anyway. I got him, Linda. I finally got him. I know you would have wanted me to do this, to stand up for myself. I did it. I sat there for a while just thinking about all the good times, all the years we spent together. I thought about the way she used to smile when she caught me looking at her. I thought about the time we went on that trip to the coast, just the two of us, holding hands like we were still in our 20s. And when I stood up to leave, I realized I felt lighter, like the weight of her loss had been replaced by something else, something more enduring. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't the old man who'd let his grandson steal from him. I was a man who'd fought back, and I'd won. As I walked back to the car, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden light over the cemetery. The shadows were long, but they didn't feel threatening anymore. They felt like a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's light to be found, if you look hard enough. The storm was over. The dust had settled, and I had the peace I'd been searching for. Was it worth it? Yes. Yes, it was.